Yep. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Crystallize Livestream. Today, we will be with board discussing a little bit on the three, let's say, major questions where people are asking when they consider or they've heard and they're curious about headless infrastructures, headless e-commerce, and the other phrases with the word headless in them. So essentially, with Mr. Board, we'll go through like these three major questions as to what, how, and why you would use you would go for headless infrastructure in your solution, whether that is in e-commerce space or general, but more like in the e-commerce space where Crystallize is active. So hello, Mr. Board, and hello to the community watching.
Hello, hello. Yeah, thanks, Stavros. So let's start with the first question, which is basically the what.
Yes.
So what is headless e-commerce? We get this question a lot.
And it's usually right. So it's a popular, concept like nowadays. I guess people are, more stack is coming to the surface, and it's more like follow this headless Jamstack, tutorial thing. So many people may be wondering what it actually does, what it actually is.
Yeah, and the simplest answer is basically that the front end is decoupled from the back end via an API, so that you have the front end which is independent of the back end. That's the simplest kind of answer. And if we will, let's look at the front end. So what do we mean with the front end? So here we, for example, have one of our front ends for Crystallize. It's one of our demo stores. And here you see that you have a beautiful e-commerce front end with the combination of, articles, and you have products, and you are able to, shop in a beautiful store. So this is a headless implementation on top of a Crystallize backend. So what does the backend look like? So this here is from our developers page, and basically we have an API which is using GraphQL.
Yeah.
And here you see that this is a playground. You can see that it's fast, 6 milliseconds for this guy. But basically, what the product is an API. So you send it a request using GraphQL, and then you get back data, structured data. And this is one of the key points, not to dive into GraphQL, but here I have the possibility of saying, okay, I would like to have the default variant of this product, which is, different colors, for example, what's default, and then maybe give me the images here. And I'm just curious about the URL of the image there. So very quickly, I can extend what I'm requesting from the backend. So that's kind of how or what we are delivering from the backend. And then that is consumed by the front end. So that you can make whatever front end that you basically would like. And the third way to look at this is for a marketing person or a content editor, you have a UI that you can work with.
For sure.
So, for example, a catalog. I have my shop, I have my sofas, and here I have my Arbor Eco sofa, for example, with the pricing and all of the beautiful images, the rich description, the spec, etc., etc. So this is kind of the three sides, I would say, of headless e-commerce, where you have the actual front end. This is the web shop or the UI, that user experience that the customers use when they shop. You have the API for the developers, simple to use, semantically descriptive, fast. And then you have a UI, which is basically where editorial users are adding and modifying products. So I would say that's the three main views on headless from a top level.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to mention here that essentially, like in the front end, you consume from either if it's Crystallize, you consume both your content and your product information. But essentially, the front end is there to just query the data out of the different systems you're using, just presenting that data out, and you of course handle it, whether you're doing it via the API or via the editorial interface of the application. Yeah, you do that in the backend. So it's yeah, that's I guess the concept. Awesome.
And the other side of this is also when you talk about headless. So this is typically very different from a monolithical. I'll just open one of our blog posts here, because it's you can kind of use this term, which I like, buy commodity and build innovation. Because with headless, you're not locked down to one single stack that delivers everything, which is what you have if you do, let's say, Magento or that type of solution. Then you have the front end and the back end coupled in one, and you have the business logic typically in what they call modules that you configure, plugins. But with a headless architecture, you're basically picking services like Crystallize here for product information. You have authentication, you have Stripe for payment, you might have Instagram to inject social media, SendGrid to send mail, etc.
Yeah. And we've seen that like a few times, right? Because essentially when you start on a project, you say, okay, I need to do this 5-10 things. And then you go to a platform and ask, okay, how many of these can you do? And they say, all right, yeah, I can do pretty much everything. But then you're missing on other things, I guess. Or it's not doing exactly what you want, but it's doing partial of this work. And then maybe you need it in the future to enhance it. And then you can't because you essentially are locked there, right?
Yeah, and it gives you freedom to build the best of breed stack, basically. And if you look here, without going into details, you have your stack, which is the commodities. So it's online services that you access via an API. You stitch together if you need SendCloud for shipping, for example, or if you're selling software international, and maybe you want to use Octobot for managing taxes in 40 plus countries. And then you spend your budgets on the front end. So you can, spend more of your budget on front end rather than spending it on upgrading and maintaining software.
Because that's another giant thing for people, right?
Oh, yes. So we typically see that a lot of the guys we talk to, let's say they're using Magento, not to pick on Magento, but let's do it. But this is typically installed on the server, and you have to maintain it, you have to upgrade it, you have to run the servers, patch it with security, patches, etc. So once you've done that a couple of years, you typically end up with spending maybe 80 or 90% of your resources on just maintaining your stack. That's not very good for innovation and experimenting in the front end, etc. And we'll get back to this service API when we talk about the architectural side of things. But basically, it's a best of breed stack, and it gives you freedom to build the front ends exactly the way you want.
So this is essentially like when you're wondering when is the best time to essentially, or not best time, but best project, when you should look like in a headless architecture. When would you say that would be the case?
So let me open up another page on our website. So I'll just do our about page, because we focus a lot on our mission, our values. So our mission is to push the boundaries of internet craftsmanship. And what does that mean? So basically, what we're talking about is if you want to have a design-driven process, you want things to be fast. If you want to have a process where you continuously improve based on data, so you have a data-driven continuous development process, and you have a tailor-made or expertly crafted front end so that you design the customer journey or the checkout process exactly the way you think. And then you improve it and test if that converted better, or if your customers are more happy, or you sold more. And I think it's more about, if you're looking to build a tailor-made experience that is really, really fast, then headless is a good approach. But of course, it does require some skills, and we'll get back to that, in order to put together a best-of-breed stack, tailor-made your front ends, and then implementing your own service API, which is your business logic, basically.
Awesome. Yeah. So, all right, cool. I mean, that gives us a little bit of the idea of what essentially it is. But yeah, now you went to the point of why would I, as a, let's take first like the business perspective of things, because that's truth to be told, that's where the decisions are made most of the time.
Yeah.
So me as a business owner, or why should I move, or why should I look into that direction?
Yeah. So let's start with this one. So
Yeah,
Google introduced something called the Core Web Vitals, which is basically metrics that includes performance or site speed in how well you're ranking in Google. And typically, if you go check any website, web shop, PageSpeed Insight is a public tool from Google. You want to score in the green, so the 90 to 100 here. Sorry. If not, you actually get a penalty in Google. So site speed is really a big driver, because if you look at, we did some research on how much the site speed actually affects the ranking in Google. So we did this last year, where we optimized for a specific term. We built basically 3 websites with totally fresh domains that we bought. So no domain authority or backlinks or anything to those. And then we optimized the page for a perfect 100 page speed or page score in terms of SEO. And what was the result when we published a page speed of green, a perfect 100, 50, and 22? So we put it online, let Google index it, and then after, was it 8 weeks?
Yeah, I see 8 weeks there.
8 weeks, we did a ranking check, and we continuously monitor this. And then the green site was #1 in Google, in Norway and in UK and in the US. And the 2 others, the red and the yellow, they were not even on the first 5 pages in Google. And that was still the fact also months after this. So it really is a big differentiator in terms of ranking in Google. It's not the only factor, but it makes it easier to score high. I mean, if you score high, it makes it easier to crawl up on the SERP positioning.
That I also would guess that it would affect the money that I have to pay for ads in order to, since I am getting organic traffic, I can cut my costs on ads and pricing there.
Funny you should ask, Stavros. Google uses something called a quality score. So this is basically how Google perceived the quality of your website. So where performance is now a big factor of this, so site speed with Core Web Vitals. And you could actually get a discount of up to 50% if your site is fast and you don't have, pop-up windows and all the things that they also check for. But if you score well here, you can get a discount on ads. Other side, if you score bad, if you have a really slow site, if you're scoring in the red, 25 out of 100 or even 10, you can actually get a penalty up to 400%. So if you're using Google AdWords to pay for traffic, if you're fast, you pay less. Simple as that. So those are, I would say, really big drivers from the, let's say, the business side of things.
Yeah. But also it would allow you to expand also, I guess, in various new ways you want to promote your business. Like I want to have an app. This is quite the traction as well nowadays, I guess, e-commerce in an app, or do various things in multiple channels. So it's also something to think about, I guess, before making a decision in these things.
Definitely. So you could combine both, let's say, multiple country sites. So if you have like 20 international web shops, you can combine them on the same infrastructure, but still have separate front ends in different languages and all of this. But you could also iterate quicker and experiment with, for example, an app or a concept that, let's say take our furniture store that sells both sofas and plants. Maybe you make a separate site that just sells the plants with optimized content for that, for example. So you can experiment and see, okay, that's something actually the market liked. Another point, which from the business side, I think is really important, developers like to play with the latest tools. And we see that partners and customers are really looking to adopt the new technologies because they want to keep the good developers, because they really want to play with, Headless and GraphQL and the new front-end technologies. And with Headless, you can choose to use the latest, greatest front-end technology, if it's React Native or Next.js or Vue or Gatsby. You choose, so you have freedom, and that's something that it's a developer experience, but also employee experience. Then, if you're let's say, an integration shop, right? Because you can play with the good tools, and I think that's important, compared to maintaining an
old stack that it's and then I guess it's a pretty hard point. You can of course iterate and move it to a next gen essentially in the future, because you can of course try it, check if it works for you and your company and your employees, and then move it to that newer version of new tech stack essentially.
And when we talk about this modern tailor-made front-end experiences, it basically also means that you can spend more of your budget on tailor making and being data-driven, optimizing your customer journey, optimizing the checkout, building unique business logic for how you do, inventory discounting based on the factors which is important to your business. For example, dynamic pricing of seasonal, goods like, fashion, for example. So that's where you really want to spend your budgets. So there's plenty of reasons from the business side to think about Headless. But Stavros, you're a developer. What if we switch the perspective? So as a developer, why would I then want to use Headless, or what's the technical reasons for going Headless?
So I guess it's so from my perspective, it's of course the thing you mentioned, which is the most crucial one. I don't want to be restricted from technology. So I don't necessarily need to use specific technology, specific framework that I'm not familiar with, which essentially would take a ton of time or maybe not a ton of time, but quite some time to learn and master, to cut off from there. And essentially you will get this is also going towards business perspective, but it cuts quite some time for building a proof of concept store, essentially, right? Or I want to try something new. And why not use the same data, try to replicate what I have and see how it performs on that new framework, for instance, that was released, or try a new tech, essentially, the entire new stack. But also I think it's really important, at least the way I see it, is that, and I've seen it actually in some current projects, is that, all right, I have found a few solutions that they're actually, okay, they're looking good, but for like one part of the stack, say authorization, just as an example. But this thing, I can see that, all right, it handles what I'm trying to do now, but as a part of my future journey, what I want to do in the future with with this example eCommerce shop, it doesn't cover me quite as much as I would like to. So I want that to be an easy way to migrate in the future, or actually just get that out of my architecture and plug something in, which is, I think, really important, to not have to migrate entire structures of what I currently have over to a new solution. Imagine how long that would take. Right? And,
I think that's a good point. And also, if you see, let's take authentication, and a lot of e-commerce services have authentication in. At Crystallize, we have actually decided that authentication is not in Crystallize. Because you are typically using several services and building this stack. So this is exactly what you said. If you want to exchange one part, if it's Crystallize or Stripe or whatever, you can exchange that part. And ideally, you have it encapsulated with, for example, payments. This is where you integrate in the service API. So this is front end. We have a different live stream on this, but front end middleware, as we call it.
Yep.
And since you have this abstraction layer, you could easily exchange parts of the stack. So you could do partial migration, and you don't have to do this big, let's do a 1-year project and change everything. You can add multiple front ends, you can change parts in the backend, and you can continue to build your own business logic in the middleware. So you have a lot of freedom. That's some of the things we.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important and overlooked in quite a few cases.
And also one point that we kind of touched on, as a developer, it's more fun to play with the new shiny tools.
Yeah, for sure. Like, at least try them, see if it I don't know, fits you, suits you.
Yeah. So okay, so that's kind of the why. People.
Yeah, a few parts of it. Maybe it's yeah.
No, of course, there's always different perspectives and several reasons, but it's kind of this future-proofing. This kind of one thing I would like to summarize the why with, so that you future-proof your stack and make it so that your developers want to work with it.
Third big question is, how would I implement, or how would I go towards an e-commerce solution? How would I start? How would I maybe, you know, from building a team for a project to many other things?
But so you, as a both partner manager and developer, you work with a lot of companies and a lot of integrators. And what would you see as kind of the requirement? Is headless for everyone, or is there some specific, or are there requirements on the organization to successfully adopt a headless strategy?
So I would see that simple as to like we're building you're looking at the project. So essentially what you have, like we touched on it before, is that you have a set of requirements that you want to cover to fulfill that project. And of course, make it future-proof if you can do that. But essentially, to start with, you got some key requirements. So the idea with Headless is, of course, that you pick the best stack that fits these requirements. But there are many services out there, right? So I guess, and they may be all good, there may be some of them that are bad. So essentially, I guess that picking some of the services that fit the project well, and that your team can work with, they're maybe, you know, easy to develop with, or it has some flaws, or it doesn't, essentially it's doing 80% of what you're meaning to do. So these are, I guess, some key points that essentially project managers or someone that's looking essentially to build something on a headless infrastructure.
Sorry to interrupt you, but if you, because you mentioned a little bit the team and what kind of teams and skills, because it might be different from, let's say, spinning up a Shopify and selecting a team and going live.
For sure.
So what's if you're going full on to the headless approach, what kind of skills do you see in the organizations that we work with that successfully implement headless e-commerce strategy?
So yeah, again, it's a bit different from what you would typically see from launching something that is, it's really common, and it's totally fine. Launching something with a templated solution that, okay, you pick what costs less, you pick a proper plugin to do this and that, and then you launch something. It could be just to prove the concept of you going to business. But essentially what you're able to do with a decoupled infrastructure, and being able to push more into certain parts of that matters in the business, is essentially something like, all right, I can build a team that essentially I will have someone that will focus on the integration part. I will have someone that is really capable with designing the customer journey, because essentially we did talk about this tailor-made journey that we can make for the customer. And if you see that from your analytics. Many people are using Google Analytics, right, for their websites. That something doesn't convert, you will be able to change that. You will be able to build something that actually converts to get your business to scale. So it's quite a few things that make a team complete. Like for the analytics, you may need an analyst that will handle all of these things. You will want, of course, the developers to develop what the UI UX team will be doing. So it's quite a few things that take place there.
So basically, you want the skills to kind of match the stack. And so if I want to summarize, so front-end developers to build the customer journey, this is React developers or Vue developers, and typically they're using GraphQL as a language. And then on the second level, because you want to tailor make your business, and that's also looking at the structure of your products and your content. And this is typically what information architects or when you're doing content modeling, which is a bit different from if you're doing a standardized e-commerce solution. You typically have a product and that's it. And maybe you can add some custom attributes, but you can't really model complex businesses in it. And as you said, the UI UX, of course, designing a tailor-made customer journey. And you mentioned the data analyst to make decisions based on
and it's A/B testing, right? We've seen that, and it's people like in Netflix. We've seen that in Netflix as well. So it's it's people doing that.
Yeah, we had a good example, as you mentioned, on our conference in New York, where Netflix had a talk, and they talked about their onboarding process. And they, long story short, was 2 scenarios: a 4-step checkout or sign up to Netflix, and a 6-step sign up. And he asked the crowd, 300 people, which do you think is the best? And everybody said the 4-step checkout.
Yeah, because it's shorter, right? So it's
So the data said it was the longest checkout that converted the best. So it's important to know or to use data to make your decisions. But also then, so the first step is really, if you look at headless architecture, it's really to look at what's my stack. This is what we talked about here in terms of which services do I want to use, and that will be different for different organizations. If you're selling digital products, for example, it's different than shipping physical products. So then you might want to work with a fulfillment service or a global shipper and things like that. So this is kind of the first stack, which is the enterprise architecture or the architectural side of things. And then we briefly talked about content modeling, and we've done a couple of live streams on this, but basically what we're talking about here is being able to design the structure of your products. So what do they contain? How are we going to market it? With, in this case, it's appliances, and you have ingredients, you have recipes and chefs. So obviously this could work for Smeg or KitchenAid, for example, selling appliances. They could use recipes to market, drive traffic, or an online grocery store where you have ingredients, tomatoes, potatoes.
Yeah, and all the O's.
Yeah, all the O's. But also you have the creating and managing product side of things. So I briefly showed it earlier, but you have to create your products, of course. So this is from marketing side. You both want to be able to create, if it's plants you're selling, be able to manage your products. So creating descriptions, beautiful images, etc. And also typically you have a content strategy, so that you might want to create blogs or articles about houseplants, for example, and use this to drive traffic to your web shop, basically. And this is an example of an article where you have the combination of rich marketing content and products. And of course, here as a marketing person, I'm able to fully control this and then publish it. You also have things like collections, or we call it often grids. Not often, we call it grids, which is a collection here of plants, sofas, and articles. So it's different types of products, and being able to, we typically refer to this as desking, where you want to maybe replace some products with this guy, like that. So you can really work as a marketing person to categorize and create content. And maybe the last part we can look at here is, let's say you're selling coffee. Then you might want to build taxonomies for the taste, so that you could have the different products being tagged with the taste profile, and you could show, you might also like this coffee because it's got a similar profile, for example. And this, of course, could also be used for navigation, search, and you could have multiple taxonomies here. So it's really about software stack or software services, being able to build the content modeling, and then you need to create your content.
All the way to take in orders, I guess. So the full round trip and how you want to handle that.
Yes, because, and maybe we first actually look at the, you have to build your front end before you can take the order. What we showed, and this is where the front end developers come in, and the UI UX designers. So from our point of view, this is an example of technologies you can use to build your front end. If you prefer Gatsby, for example, you can do that. Or let's say we want to do Next.js, which is what I showed here with the furniture demo. So you could use a boilerplate as a starting point. So you have a boilerplate that scores really well in our page speed, and use that as a starting point to basically get started. But with Headless, this is about creating a tailor-made experience. So it's not use the template and go live and be done with it, because that's not the point. Then you can use a template-based solution or a traditional solution. So that's the front-end developers. You have the designers in this part. And then the last part, as you said, was the orders there. So if we go here to look at some fulfillment pipelines.
Maybe change the tenant, because this is
oh yeah, this was a wrong tenant.
Yeah.
So here we have, when you get orders in, you can create different fulfillment pipelines. So for example, if it's in-store pickup, that might be one process versus home delivery, or special delivery from Stavros, where you have Athens delivery, where you have the states of the orders, new, packing, in transit, delivered. And all of these states you can manage. And with a headless approach, it's typically to orchestrate the states. So to, again, integrate with your own fulfillment stack. It's not that Crystallize or your headless e-commerce would deliver everything you need, but you should be able to orchestrate so that you can capture an order, and based on if it's a digital product, to maybe give access to newspapers, or if it's a subscription-based product, to ship out coffee, for example, or if it's a traditional product where you want to ship shoes home to people, or in-store pickup. So this is kind of the fulfillment side, and I guess once you've reached the fulfillment side, then that's the round trip of your store.
You basically have, I guess, a pretty much full thing.
I guess the last part there is, once you're launching your store, that you can use the data and the analyst insight to make decisions on, okay, what should we improve? What should we do in the next iteration? So that you end up with this continuous development approach and continuously improve your online store. And that's, from our perspective, the round trip of the steps in order to adopt headless technology. And again, this is for the companies that wants to build something that is scoring well, 90 plus in page speed, where you have a tailor-made customer journey and you want to adopt a continuous deployment or continuous improvement process with rapid experimentation and changes based on insight. So kind of a modern approach, right? I guess from what I recall, Stavros, this is typically what we talk about when we discuss headless e-commerce, and what's how,
our view.
and why.
Okay, yeah, like yeah, I guess this is what our take on I guess the whole structure could be, like what the round trip could be. Like you said, it's continuously testing, continuously improving, and we do that ourselves, right?
Definitely, we deploy typically multiple times per day if it's for a website or a product, or the Crystallize service itself. And we can really, we see also, building proof of concepts and launching something where we use a few hours and kind of import products and create a beautiful and fast web shop. So you can get this time to market really quick. But a big differentiator from, let's say, if you click up a store in a standard template-based solution, our way of going headless is that you can get live typically at the same time, but then that's a starting point to start to tailor make your customer journey, and that instead of having that being the end of the line where you can go in terms of customization.
And then whether you either fail or succeed, but yeah, that's correct. That's true. Awesome. All right, I think that's pretty much what we had to talk about today, Mr. Board, right? So
I think we're good.
Awesome. So, okay, thanks everyone for joining. And for any kind of question regarding, of course, what we discussed about today with Mr. Board, or pretty much anything, you can find us always in the Slack community channel that we have. You can also reach out to by email, by website, or any other means, even here on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining. And for any questions, please reach out. Till the next time, have a great day.